Good afternoon, welcome. I'm Melissa Ridgen. A brand new Statistics Canada report is out today that shows 2/3 of Indigenous women have experienced physical or sexual assault in our lifetime. We are overrepresented in several specific types of psychologically abusive behaviors by an intimate partner. 8 in 10 Indigenous women who were ever under the legal responsibility of the government suffered physical or sexual assault while in care. This study also touches on our two-spirit and gender diverse. We're going to get into that later in the show with a non-binary former foster child. Today is part 2 of our 2-part look at the Me Too movement in Indian country. It's been a few years since Harvey Weinstein became the poster boy for bad behavior women have endured for too long. In our own communities, women have long whispered about men to steer clear of, either because they're predators or they're pests. The Me Too movement turned those whispers into yells and emboldened us to take a look at the issues that exist in our own families, our communities, grassroots movements, right up the ladder to our most powerful leaders, and even in healing centers. APTN National News has been full of headlines in recent weeks of more men being called out for their predatory behavior. Check out aptnnews.ca/metoo if you need to catch up on some of those stories. Here's a little recap. When the Me Too movement exploded in the United States with Harvey Weinstein's litany of sexual assault and misconduct allegations, the ripple effect was felt through Indian country.
An independent investigation in 2018 that found Morley Gugu discriminated against and harassed women. AFN hired law firm Faskin to conduct a separate investigation into the allegations. On October 11, 2019, one day after the AFN received the report, the Mi'kmaq chiefs from Gugu's region ousted him from his role. Now he is fighting to save his name and move on.
2 years later, and involving a different woman, sexual assault charges were laid against that former Assembly of First Nations regional chief. Morley Gugu is set to go to trial on that matter this Friday. For years, women have shared whispers about men to avoid. Even while watching many of those men rise through powerful ranks within our communities, grassroots movements, to the highest offices in Indigenous power. Women came forward with stories of inappropriate contact.
Good evening, welcome to APTN National News. I'm Dennis Ward. The Facebook messages seemed like it was an old friend attempting to reconnect. But Bethany Matewashin did not recognize the name of the person texting her and was weary. It was from an account under the name Charles Forbes, and it had no profile picture.
I was wondering, who is this and why are they calling me by my name?
He asked her to guess who he was and dropped hints like saying she's seen him wear feathers and he's been in the news. She guessed twice and he fed more clues. Then the texter said they had met at the restaurant where she worked and taken a selfie together. That's when she guessed Arlen Dumas. They had taken a selfie together back in February 2018. The texter replied, "Yes, man, you are good." He asked her for her phone number, but she did not reply. However, her phone number was visible on her profile, and the texter began to write her from a phone number, which the Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs has since confirmed belongs to Grand Chief Dumas.
Years later, Manitoba Grand Chief Arlen Dumas is now facing an HR and police investigation into other allegations, including sexual assault. Many men escape allegations unscathed, their misdeeds brushed aside in the name of politics. Many more run out of chances and eventually fade into obscurity. And others who are outed choose to address their problematic behavior publicly.
I'm here today to stand my truth and apologize to Laura Lee Hall and her family and her community. I want to firstly acknowledge the pain and hurt that I have caused to her. I sincerely and apologize for what you have went through carrying that trauma.
Even places of supposed healing can be target-rich environments for predators.
She was just crying, but she explained how he was saying The elder was saying how he has different desires than his wife, and asked if he can get naked for her, basically, and asked if she wanted it and whatnot. And she got scared. She ran away, told other staff.
Communities and organizations to this day grapple with the age-old problem of men behaving badly and women bearing the scars of that behavior. Well, last week we had women on talking about this issue. Here's some of what they had to say.
I think, when we look at the misogyny and the patriarchy that exists, across this country, I think that's one of the biggest reasons why women, and the 2S community have to often navigate systems and advocate systems and seek justice without the support, of the male community, and I think it's time for, many of our Indigenous men and boys, to really reclaim their warrior roles and say enough is enough, because Indigenous women and girls, and the 2S community have been victimized for long enough. Not only are we victimized outside of our communities when we leave, but we're also victimized within our nations and our communities, and it's time to bring this issue to the forefront and to talk about it and to address it and to ensure that there's adequate resources.
To have a healthy community and what have you, we need to include the men. They need healing. Our Indigenous men and boys, they've also go missing or have been murdered. And they've been violated due to the whole colonialism impact and oppression. So, they need to be there as well, and we need to be able to work together.
And I'd like to see men call other men out. When a chief is charged, for example, we don't hear anything from other chiefs.
No. Silence.
And there's that silence around it. I don't know what would be so wrong with saying, we're really upset, angry, even dismayed to hear that happened. We hope that the, alleged victim, if you will, is okay, is getting what she or he needs. And, we can't say anything right now because it's before the courts, but we are not happy to hear that happened and there's an investigation. I don't know what's so wrong about saying something like that.
So today we are doing just that. We've got the men on today. These guys have made it a priority to help men be better men. Joining us now is Henry McKay of Brothers Rekindling Our Spirit here in Winnipeg. So you watch all of this, you see the headlines, you know firsthand, I'm willing to bet most of the women that have stories, right?
Yep.
They have these stories. When you watch this, what goes through your head? Like, is this an insurmountable problem? Is there an easy fix?
Clearly, there's no easy fix. It's really sad to see that our women are being preyed upon, not only from the colonizers or the settlers, but also our own people, our own men.
Yeah.
To see that not changing is really sad.
When the women are sick of it. Like this, it's not like, I think you hit the nail on the head. Like it doesn't, we get it from every direction. It's from our own men, it's within our own families and our communities, and it's from strangers, it's from intimate partners who might not be Indigenous. We get it everywhere. We get it at work, we get it at home. What are you doing, and what do you see other men doing to take ownership of the problem?
So a lot of us are there's a movement in Winnipeg. A lot of us men, Indigenous men, we're taking ownership of our toxicity, and we're really wanting to rekindle and reclaim Indigenous ways of being and Indigenous ways of healing. So we're out there, trying to heal, mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually. That's the one thing that a lot of Indigenous people have, is that disconnection to spirit, I found. And spirit is really the center of everything, of the being of who you are. So we're working towards, finding rekindling that spirit and finding that spirit, that connection that was lost. We got to understand that our Indigenous men, our roles were taken from us from colonization, and then it was replaced with misogyny. It was replaced with patriarchy. Traditionally with the Anishinaabe, women were the ones to make the decisions, and it was up to us men to support that. even when we're talking about chief and council, that's a colonial construct right there. You know, we should go back to traditional governance. With the Anishinaabe, we had circles of grandmothers. Every once in a while, traditionally, maybe a man would be lucky enough to sit with the woman. You know, so, and I also found that the women's traditional roles were taken from her. And throughout time, we've forgotten, us men and some women too, forgotten how sacred women are. That connection they have to water, that connection they have, you know, to Mother Earth being a life giver. We forgot the sacredness of all that.
Yeah. You know, when you sit around, well, first of all, I want to know, how did this, what made you start the group, Brothers Rekindling Our Spirit?
Well, growing up, I was in care, and then, you know, while being in care, I met a beautiful human being, and he, you know, told me straight up, like, Henry, you gotta heal. You know, you carry this trauma, the stuff that you know has happened generationally, and you know you need to heal, and it's about accountability. We have to hold ourselves accountable for the actions that we do. You know, the actions of our past, it doesn't really make up who we are today, but it's a part of it, right?
Yeah.
And we gotta work to bettering what we were and what we are wanting to be.
What's the biggest challenge that you hear from the men who come to the group about, like, the biggest hurdle for them to overcome to be better, to be less toxic, to be more humble?
It's a big part is there's lack of resources, but then also when you're thinking about the 7 sacred teachings of the Anishinaabe, one of them is courage or bravery, and it takes a lot of courage, it takes a lot of bravery to admit your wrongs.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of courage to heal. Healing is hard, and a lot of men don't have that connection to any, like, traditional services when it comes to ceremony and elder drumming, all these things that our ancestors had. A lot of men don't have that.
What do you want to see happen?
I want our
there's got to
men,
be some easy things that could happen to speed the pace of this up, right?
I want our men to start, you know, really healing and getting to know your true identity as a Anishinaabe, as Inane, as Lakota, Dakota. You know, we need to really look into the traditional roles, and then also ways of being and knowledge of our ancestors, and it's still around. And I encourage, like, men, you know, get out there, find those resources. There's a wellness group for almost every day in Winnipeg now, a men's wellness group, pretty much every day of the week now.
Is there a kind of a one-stop shop for people to, and you know, our audience isn't just in Winnipeg, of course, it's across the country. Is there a place, like, how would you go about finding a support group, a supportive environment, regardless of where you are? And do they exist? Do you have to be in person? Do they exist online too? Like,
a lot of it's word of mouth, a lot of it's online social media. You can find a lot of wellness groups through that. And then also, there's a lot of child welfare agencies that are now trying to do the prevention work. So I work as a land-based therapist with youth as well, and we're trying to teach these youth that you know, being Indigenous is okay. It's a beautiful thing.
it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, and then also teaching these young boys or young men or young people that identify as men. Being a warrior, it takes a lot, and there's certain teachings that they gotta learn. There's a lot of teachings involved in it. You can't just go out there and say, hey, I'm a warrior, right? You gotta earn that. You gotta do it by your actions. You gotta get that role from the actions, and you gotta learn from other warriors.
Absolutely. Well, we're super thankful for the work that you're doing, and I feel like I should have you back on for next time we do child welfare, because I'd love to talk about that too. You know, that's one of my favorite bones to chew on. Henry, thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you.
You know, domestic violence and sexual assault and harassment, certainly not a uniquely feminine or female hetero problem. LGBTQ2S people also experience harassment and assault at a disproportionate rate. Studies suggest around half of transgender people and bisexual women experience violence in their lifetimes. I'm joined now by Aidan Withers. They are a survivor of sexual violence while they were in child welfare in BC. They reported the alleged assault to RCMP and they were victimized again by the officer in interviewing them. This ties into brand new statistics out today that shows 17% of Indigenous women have no faith in police after reporting crimes like this. Aidan, we're so glad that you could join us. You know, just for some of our audience who may not know your backstory, give us a little recap of what happened to you when you came forward with a complaint of an assault.
Well, when I came forward, I was very afraid because I had a history of not being believed by the police. So I wasn't sure if I was going to see my justice, but I pursued anyway. And 7 years after what happened to me, I got in contact with a lawyer, Michael Patterson, who helped me get through all the legal processes. And what happened to me basically was I was reporting a sexual assault and the officer grossly mishandled my case and questioned me inappropriately. And so that's why I accessed a lawyer and sued them 7 years later.
And is it all wrapped up now?
Yeah, the whole court case is wrapped up. I still feel like I'm suffering with the trauma of everything. It's hard, but I finished my court case back in January of 2020.
What was the outcome?
I got a settlement out of it, and I won my case against the Attorney General, the Queen's Court, or the RCMP, and the Ministry of Children and Family Development.
And just to clarify, when the interview took place, and this made national news headline, it was APTN National News that broke this story. We could see the officer who was interviewing Aidan, who was there making a complaint of sexual assault, asking if they were turned on by it. I think a few times that had kind of been the tact that he'd taken. Are you sure you weren't turned on by it? So we're happy that your case is resolved and that was the outcome. So, you know, this is something we've been talking about: violence against women, sexualized violence and harassment against women. This is our second part of a two-part series. What does get lost in the mix a lot of times is the LGBTQ2S community, right? So is it the stats say that it's worse, but like, as somebody who's living it, do you see that it's worse, the harassment is worse, or the violence is worse, or that it's reported less, or it's just talked about more? Like, I'm just curious, you know, your perspective as somebody who's living it.
Well, I honestly think it definitely is worse for us. Like, people discriminate against us based on just how we appear, or they discriminate on how we act and who we are. So I think it's harder for us because, like, the discrimination, even though it's not outright, we still have discrimination in our community, and even our own people too sometimes. Like, a lot of us are recovering from the trauma of residential school, and that came with strict views on anything different, and so we're still struggling in our community for acceptance.
Mm-hmm. You know, there's a new report out today by Statistics Canada, and it says, you know, something like 80% of people who have been in government care, so that could be jail, it could be foster care, have been victims of violence. You yourself, a former foster child, when you hear a stat like that, does that surprise you? I think it's shocking to a lot of us who aren't in those shoes, but I'm curious, somebody who is in those shoes, 8 and 10, like, does that seem high?
Yeah, it does definitely seem high. I stand by a firm stance of foster care is a corrupt system that needs to be completely uprooted, and jail systems as well. They need a complete reconstruction with Indigenous. We can't rebuild that system. We have to destroy it and build a completely other system. We can't fix the broken one that we have. There's just no way. There's too many laws and red tape. So ideally, I would love to dismantle these systems and start something Indigenous-led and self-govern our own communities.
Well, hopefully we see some of that, with C92, hopefully. And we are seeing that, the control is being taken back and the systems are being dismantled and reassembled from, a more traditional perspective. I guess it's too soon to see yet how long this is or if it's going to work. So I'm curious, I just want to go back, for supports for people, gender diverse and two-spirit people who are going through at the hands of violence by whomever, an intimate partner, strangers, harassment in the workplace, whatever. Do you find, are there supports and resources out there, or is that lacking?
That's lacking severely. Like the number one, so a lot of people who are Indigenous and part of the LGBTQ2 community, they often face higher rates of poverty, which then traps them in relationships that are not healthy and they're not able to get out of because they're financially dependent and they're codependent on each other. So it's hard because we're more likely to be disabled and have other ongoing trauma. So we tend to stay in unhealthy relationships longer, and that can lead to things like domestic violence as well. And I think it's a major system that impacts us. And even just getting housing for me, like recently, I just recently got a place but the housing market was so hard. Like they say that they don't discriminate, but they find other ways. Like they just say, oh, our personality didn't match up, or other things like that. So they can't outright discriminate, but they still do. And I've been even heckled in the streets by men, like holding my hands with my female partner. We've had people come up and make death threats in the presence of my infant son. So, it's still there. It's still, the homophobia and transphobia is still there.
Well, we had the women on last week, and they were saying, they put this firmly in the lap of the men to figure this out, saying, warrior up and sort yourselves out. And that's what we're doing today, talking to a bunch of men who are trying to do just that. Aidan, we're thankful that you could join us and share your story as well. It gives a lot more food for thought for all of us who are thinking that this is a men and women's problem. It's not. It goes well beyond that. And we're thankful that you could share that with us.
Yeah, thank you.
It's time for another break, but still ahead, the Moose Hide campaign is going to give out its 3 millionth moose hide tomorrow. What difference has any of it made? We're going to find out after the break.
Join our conversation now. Send your thoughts to InFocus at aptn.ca, like us on Facebook on our APTN News page, and follow or tweet us at APTN InFocus.
Welcome back. Let's go to social media now with our social media editor, Jesse Andrushko, to hear what some of you are saying about today's topic.
Thanks, Melissa. After last week's discussion, we received a lot of comments from viewers. Let's take a look. First, from Bev on Facebook. Services and resources should be completely available to all our people for free. Our people's identity has been divided. Healing processes needs to be holistic indeed. Unresolved political abuse needs to be addressed. Anna commented, it involves sex, which is still considered a taboo subject, and I think most victims are denounced and shamed so they don't come forward. Happens in Hollywood and in our Canadian military too. Happens everywhere, and is often a part of domestic violence too. So who knows how accurate the statistics really are? Will said, just curious how other natives feel about the serial sex offender having his criminal sentence mitigated because the judge has to take into account his lived experience as a native. From Krenna on Twitter, we ignore all the men who are sexually harassed and raped because it is convenient. This isn't a gendered issue, it's a people issue. People think it is okay to sexually harass others of any gender. Lastly, from Kat, more comments on what is being done about perpetrators might be a start. That's the root of this, and no one talks about what has been done about it. Shine the light on the ones doing the violence. Change the narrative. Thank you to everyone for their comments. If you would like to add your thoughts on gender-based violence, here's how. Join our conversation now. Send your thoughts to InFocus at APTN.ca, like us on Facebook on our APTN News page, and follow or tweet us at APTN InFocus.
Moose Hide campaign is a call to action to all men and boys in Canada to stand shoulder to shoulder to show each other and themselves and all Canadians really, that violence is no longer tolerated in our communities. Sage Lessert and David Stevenson with Moose Hide campaign join us now. We're happy to have you. They literally just hopped off a plane and sped their way to APTN studios to join us. We're so thankful that you could. This started because of Highway of Tears. But now we have since then we've got the Me Too movement. So I'm curious, has that just like blown it up?
Can I tell you a little about it?
Yeah.
We started in 2011 in central BC along the Highway of Tears, where dozens of women and children have gone missing and been murdered. And my dad and my sister, Raven and Paul Lessert, were blessed with a moose on the Carrier Territories and brought them home, and we sat around the kitchen table and we all cut them up together and wrote on index cards at the time, which says that wearing the hide signifies your commitment to honor, protect, and respect women and treat them with integrity and the children in your lives. Mm-hmm. And so now today it's become this movement that we include everyone across Canada.
3 millionth is being given out tomorrow. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I'm really honored. First of all, thanks for having us on the show, and great to be in this. Yeah, great to be in this territory. And so tomorrow we're gifting away our 3 millionth Moose Hide Square to the Honorable Murray Sinclair. We met him, he actually met Raven. There was a really special moment in a ceremony sort of just happened when Raven and who co-founded the campaign with Paul Lessert in 2017 at a conference they just met. Anyway, he became a big supporter of the campaign. And so as Sage had said, we've been slowly handing them out. We've always given them out for free. We consider it an Indigenous innovation for all Canadians. We think of it as a medicine for a social illness impacting everybody. If you look in your network, everybody's impacted by this. Yeah. And so it's just sort of gone like this. It's now we're giving a lot of them away, and we always have given
poor moose.
Yeah.
Is there enough moose to sustain this?
Yeah. All the hides come from either traditionally hunted moose or moose who've died in road accidents or trains. So yeah. So
I'm interested in this, you've taken Moose Hide campaign to schools, like starting with really little kids, right up to the big kids. Like, are you too little to learn about this when you're in kindergarten? Right? I think no. I mean, as a mother of an 11-year-old, I think my kid's been learning about this since he could speak, right? Yeah. But some parents might be shocked to say, like, kindergarten kids, what are you What are you bringing them?
The intergenerational knowledge transfer piece is so critical. It's something that is a central component of the campaign, is generations teaching each other how to be respectful. But also with young children, we introduce concepts like love, or what does good medicine mean to you, to a 5-year-old? And to have that incorporated into their curriculum is so special. I didn't get that when I was in school, but if I had, then I think me and my peers would have come from a lot more of a heart-centered and loving, respectful place.
Yeah. What's the challenge? And then how does the message change, I guess, then to go to the bigger kids? Because then you get to the age that my kid is at, you know, where there's different gender roles, right? They're starting to divide themselves. They're not just a massive little kids that go around together. They're starting to be like, there's the boys groups and the girls groups, and I think there's a different conversation to be had with them at that age too, right?
Yeah, for sure. And we do have actually workshops and curriculum for kids at all different levels. Sort of early, middle, and later is sort of how they're broken up. But absolutely, and it's an opportunity to introduce ideas like two-spirited identities as actually traditional, and it's actually an anomaly that we don't understand them. Like, let's get back to balance here and understand two-spirited people and people are in different genders as part of who we are.
Well, that would be, I'm curious to know how you incorporate that into the campaign then too, right? Like, it's not just men and women, there's two-spirit, gender diverse. What's the role in the campaign there?
Everyone in Canadian society must be reached with this message. We invite folks of all genders, of all ages, of all races to join us because it's so intersectional. The nature of gender-based violence is so intersectional, and so we must reach wherever there are people, we must reach them with this movement in order to ensure that our women and children are protected.
You know, I've heard women say things like, that guy who is problematic, he has the nerve to wear a moose hide pin. I've heard that about many different men. And obviously the campaign is well known, right? For people to hone in on that and be like, that guy should not be wearing that. You know, I'm curious, you know, some of the men that we've had on in the newscasts previously that are now up on either charges or investigations for harassment and stuff, we see them at all the media announcements and stuff wearing these pins, and there's lots of them, right? When you see that, do you feel, does it devalue the campaign? Or I know one of the stats here that I have, this is from your website, on average each moose hide pin starts 10 conversations. So that's 20 million conversations that have happened about ending violence. So, you know, you see on one hand somebody who's accused of violence or is convicted of violence wearing one of those, but those conversations are still happening. How do you kind of reconcile it in your head?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's something that we've had to deal with all the way along. So the first thing we like to say about the moose hide is we think of it as in a space of a medicine, and it is not an opportunity to virtue signal. It is not a badge of honor. It's a flag that says, hey, we got a problem.
I love that.
And it's a problem that each and every one of us has to acknowledge is an internal problem for men. So the issue here isn't necessarily one of standing up and going, hey, look at me, I'm part of this. And it's not something to be even proud of. It's something to say, hey, we're in a situation where we're really out of balance as men, as your last guest had said. There's a lot of healing to go on. And this is acknowledging that we're living half of our life. If we live like in the colonial structure, there is a really important part of us that is a spiritual, emotional part of us. And for others, and I thought about this on the way over, and I thought, if you can't hold power and authority in a healthy way unless you first hold your pain and your weakness as a man. And that's why we always relied on our women. We always relied on our communities, not this single individual man who can stand up and make it in the world alone. That's not how Indigenous communities lived. We lived together and in unity and in need of connection with each other. And so, so this is a signal that we need help. And this is a signal that's saying, I'm reaching across the aisle and to anybody and saying, hey, we need to talk about this.
I love that.
Yeah.
That's a point to make. It's not to be used for virtue signaling.
Yeah, no.
Right. I would ask too, beyond men have to be doing the work too. What can the rest of us be doing to help? I'd be curious your thoughts, Sage.
Well, the intention behind the pin and offering folks the opportunity to take action by joining us at our national gathering on May 12th is these are 2 interventions that folks can take that are actionable. And what folks can do in our larger communities or around your dinner table is to spark that dialogue. And that's one of the pieces of magic that the pin produces is discourse and asking people to consider to wear the pin or why they would not wear the pin. It generates those millions of conversations that are bringing violence out of the shadows and into the light. And that's why we're doing it. And it's so, so, so important. And every single member of those dialogues is very important, not just the men and the boys, but really in the K-12 education systems, in our governments. Everyone plays a role, whether it's forward-facing like we are, or if it's the folks who are community members or running community organizations. Everyone has a use for this piece of land medicine. This is land medicine that we're giving you. You know how to use the medicine best to heal the social ailment that's in our society.
I love that. I'm really glad you guys could stop by today. And I'm looking forward to, Maurice Sinclair is one of my favorite humans. I'm happy that that you're honoring him. And have you met him before?
Yes, in our community, he's my uncle. He's
well, it's a family reunion, right? Well, I'm happy that you guys stopped by. We've got to go and take another break here. When we come back, a men's support group in northern Saskatchewan, they're trying to be a solution to this problem that we're talking about. They're going to join us when we come back. Stay with us. There was so much going on before I didn't have time to phone him and tell him that the lineup changed because of Men of the North Support Group is an outreach initiative that welcomes all men regardless of religious or ethnic background and socioeconomic status. They operate out of La Ronge, Saskatchewan. I got the chance to chat the other day with founder and CEO Chris Morasti. Chris, thanks so much for joining us. I see that you've just welcomed a brand new grandson into the world, your first grandchild. You look at that sweet little face, the statistics of male perpetrated violence against women, gender diverse folks. You see this little baby, what does the future look like when you look into that face?
It is very difficult at this point, as we go through a society and we see a lot of fatherless children growing up. And I think that it's one of the greatest struggles that we see in society is a lot of children today being raised without fathers. And I think that it's, got to be one of our biggest problems that we have today, as there's no positive role models in children's lives, and very few, especially from the male end of things. Yeah. And so I think that, with this newborn that we just had yesterday, I'm going to do whatever I can to make sure that, dad is constantly in this young man's life.
You are a minor by trade. You want to go back to school, get your PhD in psychology, and you somehow have managed to have time for this men's group, which is what we want to talk about today, that operates in La Ronge. What made you want to start it? When did it start? Tell us a bit about what it entails every week.
Well, first and foremost, I'd like to say that, to all the women and children and elders out there, that as a man that is trying to break the cycle, that I am very sorry for, all the negative things that happen from a man, especially when it comes to the toxic masculinity. And so with the program, the Men of the North, is we are trying to dismantle toxic masculinity from a grassroots level. So getting the guys in each and every week and talking about, a lot of those things us men don't normally talk about, and being able to release that emotional tension, I guess, and being able to show our vulnerability in a more safe and healthy environment and around other men in the community. And so that way we can open up the doors to more healthy, positive connections in and around the community. And for us, right now we have 55 members. We get about, on average, 12 to 18 members each week coming in. And to me, it's working.
And you guys, they come together, you eat together, you share together. Like, that's sort of the gist of it. It's not like a really, just give us a kind of a little a heads up of what a typical meeting would entail. How long does it go? What do you guys do?
Yeah, we usually set our programs, our meetings for about 2 hours each week. And so as soon as there's a certain time comes in, we ask the guys to make sure that, time management is very important, and we don't allow anybody in after a certain amount of time, as we find it very rude, somewhat disrespectful when somebody's walking in during someone's sharing time. Mm-hmm. And so we try to accommodate and make sure that there's nobody coming in. And if somebody wants to leave, it's totally up to them. And then, we have a meal. We get together. We have a certain topic each week. So we have a topic focused group. So that way we can focus in on one topic, and we can put the pieces together on that specific topic, whatever that topic might be that week. And that way guys can come in, do a bit of research, go on Google, do a bit of reading, even sharing their personal experience about whatever that topic might be. Mm-hmm. and he'll help you put those pieces together. And then that way you can put those pieces together on that certain topic until you can move on to the next topic. So each week will be a different topic that we discuss about. And we ask the guys in the group to remain focused on that topic. Don't be bringing in outside things that you cannot control. So anything that comes in, it's more on the I statements rather than you, they, them, finger pointing and blaming.
I love it. Last week we had women on. We were talking about this topic with women, and there was an overwhelming desire to see men take ownership of this. It's like, why is it always we bear the brunt of it, and we have to come up with the solutions to it? We've got to find ways to protect ourselves, to hopefully stop, not being the victims in all of this. And they're calling on men to say, men need to start calling each other out. Men need to start pointing it out when they see it. Men need to make sure that other men know that it's not acceptable. Is this part of something that's discussed at your group? What does men taking accountability really look like to you?
Yeah, it definitely is. It's taking accountability for your own actions and shouldering the responsibilities of the world, so that way we can help each other through those vicissitudes of life. When it comes to toxic masculinity, we often see that and we hear that in society. And what does that really mean? Well, to me, it means that men are not allowed to show any types of weakness, whether it be crying or talking or having that emotional regression or any kind of anger. And usually when men are not allowed to, show their vulnerability, it's usually often met with anger or isolation. And oftentimes anger is met with violence, and isolation is met with suicide. And so we have a lot of men that are feeling those two struggles, whether it be the fight or flight mode, or whether it be isolation mode, and it's contemplating suicide. And so when they start thinking about these suicidal thoughts, they start thinking about all the people that they might hurt, I guess, on their way out. And so we're trying to be more preventative, and the preventative magnet sort of field, where we're getting the guys in, talking about their emotions, sharing their thoughts on ideas, giving their own wisdom, their own lived experiences, and and coming in and having a free meal and breaking bread with another man and having meaningful, deep-hearted conversations with other men in the community. It's unbelievable. It really is. And more men I see that are telling us in our workshops each week on how much the program is helping them, how much their lives are getting better. We actually had, I think about a month and a half ago, we had about six men break down and actually tell us on how much the program has been helping them. Two of which told us that when they started the program 7 months ago, that they put down the alcohol and haven't picked it up since. And one of which was at his dad's funeral, in which his teenage daughter came up to him and told him on how much positive, healthy changes she sees within him.
Well, we thank you for doing this work in your community. That's Men of the North in La Ronge. Chris, thank you. And we, I think we can just all agree to hope that little newborn babies like your grandson, I've got an 11-year-old son, let's hope that this cycle is broken with this generation and that they do better.
Yeah, so for sure. And it is definitely a lot of work. It's a very complex solution or complex area. With no real, one easy, simple solution.
Yeah, but you're putting in the work, and we thank you for it.
I know that Men in the North, is been, trying its best to get the guys to come in and to speak their truth and to shoulder the responsibilities of the world, so that way they can get their lives together and help their families and help their communities. So it is hard work, but it's worth it. It really is.
Mercy, Chris. We've got Steve Crochane on the phone right now. He is the man behind the blog Right Ojibwe. Steve, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you very much. Thanks.
Well, I'm a fan of your blog. You have been writing about this issue for a long time, violence against women, predatory and bad behaved men. Why, you're a dad, you're a mashum, you're a uncle, you're a husband. What made you put pen to paper about it though?
Well, nobody wants to think bad of themselves like this. Like say I was an abuser. So nobody wants to admit that. I liked what the guy was saying that you're talking about, like accountability.
Yeah.
But too many of us are not willing to do that really, truly. Because who wants to say that I was mean. My daughter once asked me. She said, "Dad," my oldest daughter said, "Dad, are you evil?" I said, "No, I'm not evil. I'm just mean sometimes." And then I asked her, and another time I was talking to her, she said, "How come your granny and your auntie don't like me?" And he said, "Well, you're beating up their sister and their daughter. What do you think?" Yeah. So those are the things, right?
Yeah.
We don't want to say that. And the thing is, too, it's easy to excuse. Like we look and say, "Oh, it's the alcohol," or it's my life. But at the same time, we got to look at some of the realities. And a lot of times it's just frail insecurity, frail ego, insecurity, and jealousy, and that could be the foundation of a lot of the problems. Of course we have trauma, like no doubt about it. Like Native people have so much trauma, like that. It left a mark. But at the same time, this violence against women, it's universal. We see it in other cultures. We see it, play out every day on news. Like look what just happened. Man killed his wife and two kids in Polish. I mean, it's awful, right?
I know.
Yeah, and so a lot of it has to do with how we interpret what's going on. Like it's easy to do excuses like, "Oh yeah, I had trauma when I was a kid," stuff like that. That's true, but it manifests in many different ways. Like that trauma. We're violent for a lot of ways. We're mean to others, but when it comes to women, we've lost that true teaching. And that's what it comes like about the women, because let's face it, society has a message, and all of us have bought into it in some form or anything. It's society's women are made out of the rib. Women are secondary. It was the woman that tempted. If you're into that Christianity and that, but that has a lot to play in society. Even if they're not Christians, all of those norms, they become the normal. So women are seen as secondary. But in our way of life, that's not the case at all. Mm-hmm. They're the ones that have the power. They're the ones that we should revere them. But yet we do lip service to them. We wear our mohside, on our lapels. But at the same time, we're kind of fooling that way, and that's the basics. So. And we're not willing to admit it. We're not willing to say to somebody else, "Man, I see the way you treat your wife, your girlfriend. She's walking on eggshells." Yeah.
Well, you've been writing it for a long time, and I hope that you can stop writing about it soon, because the problem just relieves itself with the next generation. But I'm not entirely hopeful that that's going to be the case. Steve, thank you so much for joining us. We're glad to have you share your perspective with our audience.
Oh, Ojibwe great. And and check out my blog, Ojibwe Confessions. I write touch about a lot of issues in Indian countries, gangs, suicide, all those things that have hit us. And I appreciate APTN for having us on. Okay?
Thanks, Steve. We'll chat soon.
Okay, go on.
We are all out of time for part 2 of our 2-part look at sexual violence and misconduct against our women and our children and Two-Spirit people. Thank you so much for joining us. If you missed part 1, talking to our women about the problem and potential solutions, you can download it as a podcast. All of our InFocus shows are available as podcasts. aptnnews.ca/podcast. I'm Melissa Ridgen. Thanks again for joining us. Have a great afternoon.